configuring Salesforce. So, when you buy a license and then they give you a license or whichever edition you apply for. So, what's the first thing that you will have to do? You first of all have to configure Salesforce as per your requirements and your company's requirements, right? So, first thing that you are going to do is do a bit of personal setup, and then you will do the company setup. Okay, so you need to do a bit of setup for yourself, how you want to use Salesforce, and you need to do a bit of setup for your company, how your company overall wants to use Salesforce. So that's what we are actually going to discuss in today's session. Just give me one quick minute, let me log in into Salesforce. All right. So when you log in into your developer org, which you guys have created, it looks like this, right? So before I get into the setup part, before we start working on the setup, let's quickly have a look into the user interface and what is where. So in the top right corner here, this is the app menu, applications menu. All right, it's a drop down. You just can click on this and you can switch apps. We will talk more about apps, in the coming sessions. So all the apps that a company has, some apps are provided by Salesforce, some apps the company itself can create. All those apps will be visible here. Okay, so if you can see, there is a call center app, there is a marketing app, there is a sales app. So these apps are listed here. Just beside that, we have the help link. You click on this, it will take you to the help link of salesforce.com. Then you have the setup link. Setup link will usually open the setup menu for you. By default, it's open here on the left hand side. If it's not visible to you, then you can click on the setup link. It will open the setup menu for you. In the left hand side, this menu, if you can see, this is the setup menu. This thing is the setup menu. All right. So your setup link will help you open the setup menu in case it's not open. Then we have the settings option. So this is where you find your name. This is where you have the option to do the settings, your personal settings. So you can click on this and you will have my settings, and you also have an option of logging out from here. You have an option of going to the developer console from here. Developer console is where you can write your programs and debug your programs. All right, so developer console is a separate window where you can actually do the programming. So we'll talk about developer console after a few more sessions when we start talking about the programming in Salesforce. So that's what we have here. On the left hand side, this sidebar, if you see, it's completely dedicated to the setup menu. You have setup menu for everything, for administration, so basic administration, for building something, and then for monitoring things. See, deploying, monitoring, everything. All right, so we have the setup menu available for everything. So whatever you have to do in Salesforce, you'll have to do it from setup menu. Apart from creating data and viewing data, Apart from that, whatever you want to do, you want to create a user, you want to create an application, you want to put a logic, you want to automate things, everything needs to be done from the setup menu. All right. Yeah, just that if you just want to see the data or enter the data, that for that you don't need setup menu. For rest everything you need setup menu. Okay. So that's the setup menu in the left hand side, and then we have the tabs here. These are all the tabs. These tabs will basically, the tabs are either connected to the database tables, because we have talked about that CRM needs to store a lot of data, right? So that's what we understand. Now, if it stores a data, there must be database tables also, right? Now that's what we have in these tabs. These tabs will connect you to the database tables. Okay. Some of the tabs can also connect you to some websites. So the tab can either connect to a database table or a website. All right. Like account tab, it's connected to a database table called account. Okay. So if you click on this, you will be able to see the data from the account table. All right. See, click on go. So it shows me all the accounts here. It gives me an option of creating a new account. It gives me an option of deleting accounts. So I get access to that table, and from there I can actually create records, delete records, or view records, whatever I want to do. The same way you can actually go to opportunities, and you can view the opportunities, right? So these are different database tables. So I'll talk about the general flow of these tabs, and what does each of the tab mean. So we'll talk about that. But for now, let's just understand that how a tab functions, right? So this is overall what we have. So we have the application drop-down menu, we have the help link setup menu, my personal settings, developer console, logout, and then the setup menu in the left-hand side, and the tabs. That's it. That's all that we have here on the user interface. All right. Now, coming back to configuring Salesforce. So I need to do personal setup. As I said, anything that you want to do needs to be done from the setup menu. So we'll need to go to setup menu for personal setup. Okay, because it's personal setup, you can do it from my settings also. Click on your name, go to my settings. Okay, and then you can go to personal, and here you can change your personal information. So anything related to your personal setup change, like your name, login name, user ID, password, email ID, time zone. If you want to change your time zone that you are working in, if you want to change the password, okay. If you want to change your security token is basically one additional password which is provided by Salesforce. Okay, it's a 21 digit alphanumeric key which is provided by Salesforce. Okay, and the security token is used if you are using Salesforce on a standalone application. Right. So we'll see the use of security token a little later. So anything that you want to change, your time zone, your language, if you feel that no, I want to switch from English to some other language, you can select it from here. Like, so all your personal changes will be done from my settings, personal, and then from there you can actually go to your personal info or whatever you want to edit. Okay, password. In personal info, you have the login name and all that stuff. After that, you have password, time zone, everything. Right? So depending on your requirement, you will set it up as per your need. Then comes the company setup. The next thing that you need to do is set up the company. Okay. Company setup should be done from the setup menu. Just go to the setup menu. Uh, and here you have the company profile. here you have the company profile, and under company profile you have these options available. All right. So first thing that we need to do is we need to set up the company information. So what basically we have to set up for the company information. There are a few things that you need to set up for your company. First is you just need to enter the basic details of your company, the name, address, website. Then it comes to that language and time zone related information, like which time zone your company works in, what is the default language for your company, that sort of information. What currency your company deals in, so that's again gonna be into the company information, right? So you just need to go to setup, company profile, company information. Now whatever changes we are making here, this is going to be applicable for all the users across my company, right? And only administrators will have this access. Personal setup is something which any user can do. So a user does not have to be an administrator in order to do the personal setup changes. But a user can, for changing the company information, the user needs to be an administrator, right? Which is pretty logical also. Okay. So in the company information, if you come and click on edit, you see there is some basic information that you need to enter. Okay. In Salesforce, just notice one thing: whenever you are, into a form kind of a page where you have to enter some details, this symbol denotes a mandatory field, required field. All right. Any field which has this symbol is a required field. Other fields are not required. So this needs to be filled in. Others, if you do not have information, you can leave blank also. So coming back to the company information, you can actually fill in your organization name, phone, fax, street address, and all that address detail here. Um, then comes the locale settings, where you need to set up the default location of your company, language of your company, and the time zone. All right. So location, language, and time zone. Now these are all default language, default time zone, which means if a user, if you remember in the personal setup also, we had the option of changing the language and time zone, right? In personal setup also you have the option of changing language and time zone, and so do we have here, correct? Now in the company setup, what you are putting is a default language and time zone, which means if the user does not set up preference for himself, then by default the company language and time zone will apply. However, if the user sets up some other language, that's the language which he's going to see things in. So if the default language for my company is English, the user always have an option of going and changing it to something else for himself. All right. The same way, let's say the default time zone that the company works in is, let's say we are all in working in the company. The default time zone of the company is Eastern time, but I am working from India and I want to set my time to Indian time. So default time zone can be Eastern, and I would be able to set up my time to Indian time. So that will affect only my times. Okay. And the currency, very important thing. Now, because it's CRM, because there will be a lot of pricing related information entered into your database. What is customer buying? How much you have given the quotation for, right? What is the price of the product? Price books we are going to deal with. So currency comes into picture whenever we are putting all this information. So you have the option of choosing a currency. You can pick a currency, but in some cases there will be a situation where the company needs to work with multiple currencies. right? For example, if I am providing services to US, UK, Canada, and let's say India, four places. So definitely, the clients of these particular places are gonna um, pay in different currencies, correct? So when that happens, I'll have to store the information of those currencies also. So if I'm giving a quotation to someone from UK, right? So I might need to give the quotation in the GBP, right? Now I'm giving quotation to someone in US. I will need to store that information in USD, right? So in that case, if you're dealing in multiple currencies, you have the option of allow, clicking on this, okay. Salesforce team will get back to you and enable the multiple currencies for you. Like usually they don't allow it on the developer edition, but in any of the paid edition, you will have that option of switching to multiple currencies. So multiple currencies is where you can select more than one currency, and every time you are entering an amount, you will have the choice of selecting from the currency. So just to give you an idea on this, uh, so if you select multiple currency, every time you are entering an amount in a field, let's say this is the field where you are trying to enter an amount, you will enter 1000, and beside this you will have a small drop down where you will have the option of selecting which currency this value is for, like USD, Canadian dollars, Indian rupees, whatever. So if your multiple currency is enabled, by default it's not enabled. If you want to enable it, you'll have to write to the support team, or you just have to select this option, okay. Allow support to activate multiple currencies does not work in the developer edition, or you might write to the salesforce.com support team in case you start working for a company and you are asked to enable the multiple currencies. So all that you have to do is you just have to get in touch with salesforce.com team or raise a ticket with them. They will enable the multiple currencies for you. Got it? Then instead of choosing one currency here, you will have the option of choosing multiple currencies, and every time you are entering an amount, you'll have the option of selecting the from the drop down which currency you want to use for that particular transaction. Got it? So that's about our uh, the basic company setup with the company info and the language, time zone, currency. Then comes the next is the fiscal year for the company. Okay, so while you're setting up company, you also have to define the fiscal year for the company. Fiscal year is basically the financial year, company's financial year. What financial year company follows. Okay, so usually, you will see that you file in your taxes and everything based on a financial year, right? Maybe from 1st April to 31st March or something. So company also needs to follow a certain financial year. Now, different companies may have different types of financial years, depending on how the company wants to manage their book, which region they are in, which country they are in, and you know, what does the government actually impose on them as a rule. So depending on several factors, companies may have different financial years. So all that we have to understand here is that the financial year can be different for different companies. It does not have to be same for all the companies across the world. So fiscal year gives you the option of setting up your own financial year. The way you follow your financial year, you can enter that information into Salesforce, right? So if your financial year starts in April, you can enter that. If your year starts in July, you can enter that. So whatever is the financial year. So fiscal year start month, let's say for me it's April. So I'll just say April and save it. All right. So usually, if you've heard of financial year or if you see the financial year, it's usually it's usually 4 quarters of 3 months each. So a generic format of the financial year is that these 12 months are broken into 4 quarters of 3 months each. Okay, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, 4 quarters. Right. So that's a generic financial year with 4 quarters. Every quarter will have 3 months. So simple. Now, sometimes, some financial organizations have a different structure of the financial year. Okay. Where instead of having 4 quarters of 13 months each, they follow, where instead of 4 quarters of 3 months each, they follow the process of 13 periods
Edgy.
of 4 weeks each.
Your screen is frozen.
Okay, now is it fine?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. All right. So some financial institutes basically recommend this kind of a fiscal year also. So it's always not that every company will follow this particular pattern. Some will follow this pattern, and there are a few other patterns also, right? So in case you have any other pattern for the fiscal year apart from this, apart from the generic one, then you should select a custom fiscal year. Okay. If you have that 4 quarter of 3 months each, then stay with the standard fiscal year. If you have any other structure for the fiscal year, then you can go to custom fiscal year. This will allow you to set up your fiscal year as per your requirement. Okay. See if you see a 4-4-5 structure, 2 4 week month and one a 5 week month. So this is a separate structure. Then there are there's a structure of 13 periods of 4 weeks each. All right. So we don't have to worry about how the structure is going to be, why it is going to be like that. That's their concern. All that you have to understand is you just have to check with the finance team or the CA for the company that what fiscal year you guys follow, and just see if the structure is the simple one. Keep it standard fiscal year. If you see that it's a little custom, just go to the custom fiscal year and set it up according to that. Just one thing that you have to keep in mind is before you enable custom fiscal year, please be sure that you actually need a custom fiscal year, because this action is irreversible. Okay. Enabling custom fiscal year is not reversible. After enabling custom fiscal years, you cannot revert to the standard fiscal years, which will make things a little difficult for you to manage in case you want to come back to the standard fiscal year. So that makes things a little difficult. So for that reason, till the time you're not very sure that your company is actually using a custom fiscal year, don't enable the custom fiscal year. Be a little careful here, right? Now, the point is that why are we actually even bothered about working with the fiscal year or setting up the fiscal year for the Salesforce? Why do you think it's important? Anyone? How is it going to help? We are talking about CRM, we are talking about customers data, and all of a sudden we start enabling the fiscal year or the financial year. Why are we doing that?
To generate the reports and find a business. So analyze the business, it will be useful.
Yes. So the point is that all your revenue estimations, opportunities, which customer you are trying to sell, forecasting, right? All this information is actually getting into Salesforce. What you have sold, what you are planning to sell, what is in the pipeline, everything is getting into Salesforce, right? So when all this information is in Salesforce, where would you look for a report? Obviously in Salesforce, because the information is here. So if your manager comes to you and tells you that, hey, can you tell me how much business are we expecting in next month? Where do we look for that? We look for it in Salesforce, right? Generally the reports the companies prepare, most of them are based on the this financial structure. So companies need to generate report for last financial year. Okay, how did we do in the financial year? Are we doing in this financial year till date? Because the companies will have their targets set mostly on based on the financial years and the quarters. So if you define a proper financial structure or the financial year structure for your company, you will find it very easy to manage the reports. Then every time you're trying to do a report, you don't have to go and define the dates for that particular quarter. Okay, if you know that, okay, I have defined the structure for the financial year properly, while you do the reporting, while once we are into reporting part, we will see how we can use it. But for your understanding here, um, just to give you a brief, that when you're doing a reporting part, and if you have set up correct structure for your fiscal year, you all that you have to do is you just have to tell the report that, okay, I need a report for last quarter, or I need a report for the next quarter, and it will automatically pick up the dates based on what you have entered in the structure. So you don't even have to go and define that the next fiscal quarter is actually going to start from 1st January and it is going to go till 31st March. So let me hard code the dates. That will not be required, right? So for that reason, this thing is important, and that's the reason why I say that till the time you're not very sure, because this is irreversible. So once you have done that, your entire structure of the reporting and things will, not work as per the standard logics. Then you'll have to set up a lot of things to get the standard structure in the custom fiscal year itself. So till the time not sure, don't change it to the custom fiscal year, right? Okay. Now, apart from the fiscal year for the company setup, what you need to set is business hours. Business hours is what time does your team work, or especially what time your support team works. Okay. So whether your support team works from 9 to 6 or works from 9 to 8, so this kind of an information. So business hours is the next information that you need to set up for your company. So go to business hours, click on new business hours. You'll have the option of defining the business hours. What time your support team is working. Alright, that's what we will put in the business hours. On Sunday, what time your team works. On Monday, what time your team works. For all 7 days, you can define that. Okay. Now, any thoughts on why do you think we need this business hours to be stored? Though it's written here also. Why do I need to define the business hours? How is that gonna help me? See, Salesforce is also used for the customer support purpose.
It
Yeah.
it's used for service level agreements.
Yes. So sometimes Salesforce, sorry, not sometimes, most of the times, basically, Salesforce is used for customer support as well, right? Now what happens is, if the customer is raising a request, there are some SLAs also, okay, and the request needs to be closed in that particular time. So if it is not closed in a certain defined time, then it needs to be escalated. Now, to do a proper escalation, we have to define the timings from what time to what time the support team works. So based, if I know that the support team works from, let's say, 9 to 6, the calculation can be made based on that particular time. So if there is a request which needs to be resolved in 4 hours, let's say, we are on Monday, we work from 9 to 6, okay, and request should be closed in 4 hours, and a request should be closed in 4 hours. Okay, I get a request at 11 a.m. It does not get resolved by 3 p.m. So 3 p.m. it should automatically get escalated. If I get a request at 5 p.m., if I get something at 5 p.m., should it get escalated at 9 p.m.? No, because The support team was available only till 6, and it just got 1 hour to work on it today. Tomorrow, next 3 hours can be counted, and tomorrow by 12, if it is not resolved, then it should get escalated. Correct. So to define these escalation rules and to work with the escalation rules, you have to define exact timings when your support team is working, right? And then comes the holidays. Holidays are pretty connected to the business hours. Holidays are dates and times at which your business hours are suspended. So these are the dates when your business hours should not be counted at all. Like, you know, let's say there's Christmas on a certain day. Then for that Christmas, because the team is not available on that day, nothing should get uh, the business hours should get suspended for that day, right? Because that's a holiday. If you don't define the holidays here, what will happen? On the holidays, all the cases will get escalated automatically. Got it? Which we don't want. Got it? So that is basically about the company setup. So we have seen the business hours, we have seen the holidays. So these are the basic setups that you need to do uh, for a company. Now, there is one more small setup, or a very basic setup that a company needs to do initially, and which is basically called security and identity information. Okay, so do you know what is the biggest concern of the companies which are using Salesforce nowadays, or the companies who start using Salesforce initially? What is the biggest concern that these companies have? Most of them are worried about the data being on the a shared server. A lot of people have this concern that the data is on a shared server and it's accessible through internet. Okay, so initially someone who starts using Salesforce, the concern that they have is that anyone can log in from anywhere and have a look into it. So there are two things which the companies are usually concerned about. One concept is that someone who does not have the access, if that person gets the access, uh, there's a person who is not even part of my company, if he gets the login ID password, uh, he starts looking into my data. That's a challenge. That's a problem that I need to deal with. The other problem that I have to deal with is the people who are working for my company who have the login ID password. Are they using it, within the defined capabilities, or I don't want someone from my company to go and log in into Salesforce from a cyber cafe, or I don't want someone who's working in my company on Salesforce to go and log in from home. Maybe, it's not that every company will want this, or no company will want this. Depends on the company, the kind of uh, process that they have, the kind of data that they have. Sometimes the companies do not want the employees to log in at all into Salesforce from their home, right? You can have that concern if you are running a business, if you have data, and if you have employees. You might have that concern that I don't want the employees to go back and log in at home, because when someone is logging in from a location which is not inside your office, then you do not know exactly, one, you're not very secure, sure about the security of that particular computer from where he is logging in. The account can get hacked. The second is you do not know, the other person might be taking out the data of your company. So for that reason, uh, Salesforce allows you to put some security steps for people who are trying to log in. Okay, and you can define your security and identity confirmation process. So there's a generic process which Salesforce also follows. Let's have a quick look into that. So whenever someone tries to log in, whenever there is a login attempt, Salesforce first of all does a time check. You have the option of, okay, so while we are talking about people within your company, if they can, you know, log in into your company's account outside the company or not, if that is the concern, you can actually put two restrictions. One is a time restriction. Time restriction is basically restricting the user to a certain time, that he should be able to log in within 9 to 6 only. After 6 he will not be able to log in, he will not be able to make any changes. Got it? So if you define the time restriction, then the users will be restricted to that particular time. So some companies might want to follow this process, that see, my company requires this login from, or the license or the sales rep to work from 9 to 6. After 6 there should not be he should not be allowed to access that account. Okay, so till the time he is on office till 6 p.m. he can use it, and after that he cannot use it. The second restriction that the company can put is the IP restriction. Okay. What is IP restriction? IP restriction is basically restricting the user with certain IP address. So a range of IP address can be defined, and the user will be restricted to that range of IP address. So if the user tries to log in, out of that IP address, he'll have to do extra validation to ensure that he's the correct user and he is authorized to use it. Okay. So this IP address restriction can also be imposed on the user, and time restriction can be imposed on the user, right? So depending on the requirement, the company will decide. Some companies will put neither of them. Some companies will put both of them. So it depends on the requirement of the company, or how they want to give the access to their users and all, depending on that, right? So now, first thing that whenever someone tries to log in into Salesforce, the first thing it will do is it will check that, it will do perform a time check and see if the user is allowed to log in at that particular time or not, right? If this time check thing fails, if it fails, your access is denied then and there. Okay, but if this thing gets cleared, which means if there is no restriction on the time, or if it finds that the person is trying to log in at a time which is permitted, then it goes into the next level of check, which is IP check, right? Now, if this gets cleared, login is allowed. If this fails, yeah, if it gets cleared, the login is allowed. If this also fails, if IP check fails, then it usually does a cookies check. So the process is pretty simple. So if a user is trying to log in, beyond the time which is permitted to log in, access will be denied straight away. Okay. Only if he is trying to log in within the time which is permitted for him, then only it goes to the next level of check. Then it doesn't performs an IP check. IP check means, again, it will check that if the uh, administrator has imposed some range of IP address. Okay. If that is there, then IP check will happen, and if the person is trying to log in within the defined range of IP address, then it's okay. Otherwise, it will move on to the other check, which is called the cookies check. Cookies is basically internet browsing history. So it will check in the browsing history that whether this user logged in from this particular location earlier or not. Okay, so if this cookies check is allowed, cookies check is cleared, the login will be allowed. So even if you are not logging in from a defined IP address or a trusted IP address, but if it finds that you logged in from that location or from that IP address earlier in your browsing history, then it will still allow you to log in, right? Then if this also fails, cookies check also fails, then it will ask you to get the verification code on registered mobile or email. Okay, so that's how the process is, right? So if the login attempt, when the login attempt is done, first of all, time check. If the time check fails, access denied. If it is cleared, then IP check happens. If the IP check is cleared, login is allowed. Otherwise, it goes into the cookies check. It will check the browsing history and try to figure out if you have logged in from that particular location earlier or not. If yes, still it will allow you to log in. If no, then it will just take you to the verification code section where you have to generate a verification code using your registered mobile or email ID, and then you'll have to log into using that, right? There's just a small question. The process is pretty simple. There's a small question that I have for you guys. Don't you think that for time restriction, it's very strict about the time restriction, and the process is a little lenient on the IP address restriction? See, for time restriction, it was like you are not in that time bracket, you're logging in outside the time bracket allowed, access denied straight away. For IP not matching, okay, go to cookies, not matching, okay, go to verification code. Why is it being so lenient on the IP address thing? Why do you think it's that way?
Because IP gets changed now and then. IP gets changed now and then because if the user logins from one network to different network, IP gets changed. That's why this convenience is given for IP.
Okay. IP gets changed, it can be dynamic, that's one. The other reason is that, see, don't you think, if it becomes very strict on the IP address, then the user will actually have to sit in a certain location and work from there only, right? Which is definitely not the, uh, what is it, which is not basically the USP of Salesforce. So Salesforce USP itself is that you can be dynamic, you can be flexible, you can be sitting in any location, you can be traveling and using your Salesforce.com. Now, the moment you become very strict on the IP address, you are actually enforcing the user to sit in a certain office and work, right? So for that reason, it has provided a little flexible options or lenient option on IP address. It's imposing the restriction on IP, but at the same time, it's giving you the other options also. So let's say there is someone who wants to, I have, imposed IP address. I usually want to impose the IP address restriction for my people. But at the same time, one day there's an employee who is not able to come, I want to allow him to work from home, right? So if it becomes very strict on that also, then what will happen, I won't be able to allow some people to work outside the office location. Sometimes people will need to go and sit at a client location and work. So for that reason, it becomes a little important. Got it. So that's basically about our security and identity confirmation process, right? So that's what we will be covering today. So we have talked about the basic setup. We have just done a bit of understanding about the Salesforce user interface. Okay. Then we just talked about the personal setup, the company setup, and the security identity confirmation. So this is overall what you need to decide on initially before you start working on Salesforce. So decide on what kind of restrictions you want to put, what kind of currencies you want to use, what sort of fiscal year you want to use. So these basic setups, once you're done, you are ready to start using your Salesforce application, and you are ready to uh, bring in more users into your Salesforce. So initially, as an administrator, you set it up all these things, and after that, you can just start bringing in users into your Salesforce. So there's a small thing that I would want you guys to do today after the session. As we have seen, you all have your developer editions ready by now. As we have seen the tabs, and we talked about that every tab will allow you to enter data or view the data inside it. I just want you to spend some time entering some data into each of the tab, and I want you to navigate through these things a little. Okay, so maybe spend kind of an hour navigating through it. So it will help you become a little more friendly with the Salesforce.com environment. Because it's completely new for some of you. So just get a little familiar with the environment, and tomorrow we will actually start with understanding the standard sales application. So we'll talk about understanding the standard sales application that Salesforce has given. All right. So that's what we are actually gonna discuss in tomorrow's session.